In May 2023, a tiny football team in Germany made history. Heidenheim, a team who 20 years earlier were playing amateur football, secured promotion to the country's top flight, the Bundesliga. It was a miraculous rise, and a journey they completed with 25 members of staff still at the club today who've been there from the beginning. In 2007, after the end of his playing career, which had risen as high as the Zweite Bundesliga but now dropped down into the Oberliga, the fifth level of German football, centre-back Frank Schmidt became head coach of the team he'd played for since 2003, FC Heidenheim. Heidenheim, the place, is home to 50,000 people. 2 hours from Munich, 90 minutes from Stuttgart, it's in South Germany, just above Bavaria. And the entire town sits under a 12th century castle, Hellenstein Schloss. The club's football home is the Albstadion, now known as the Voith Arena. It's actually the highest ground in all of the Bundesliga, standing 555 metres above sea level. But when Frank Schmidt arrived at the club, it was just a single 700-seater grandstand, sitting on the outside of a running track surrounded by trees. That, of course, would change, and so would the team on the pitch, because Schmidt believed in fast football. He wanted his teams to play wholeheartedly and with organisation, but with speed and precision too. Within a year, Heidenheim would gain promotion from the fourth tier, winning the newly created Regionalliga South. The club would then spend 5 years consolidating their position in the third tier, gradually creeping up the division before gaining promotion as champions in 2014. Schmidt was also voted the league's manager of the year. Another 9 years later, Heidenheim had consolidated their position in the Zweite Bundesliga. Many employees from the club's semi-professional era were still there though. Holger Sandwald was still CEO. Alexander Roth, who played with Frank Schmidt back in 2003, was the club's sports manager. And both are still at the club today. But what did change dramatically was the stadium. The running track was replaced by stands on all sides of the ground. The original grandstand was still there, distinguishable by its faded seats, and by 2015 the four corners of the stadium had also all been filled in, with a video screen added too. All in all, it brought the capacity up to 15,000. The club also rose in prominence within its community. It's loosely affiliated with dozens of clubs within a 100-kilometre radius, helping to supply smaller sides with equipment and expertise in exchange for advertising. And that network continues to grow. Even so, by the 2022-23 season, Heidenheim was still an underdog. By annual payroll, they were just the 9th highest spender in a division of 18 teams, spending an estimated €9.5 million a year on wages. By comparison, Hanover, the division's biggest spenders, spent €22.3 million a year. Hamburg in second spent €21.4. But despite this, Heidenheim enjoyed an outstanding year. Schmidt's side were a counter-attacker. They man-marked all across the pitch and would break with precision and pace whenever they won possession. In the first half of the season, they lost just twice, arriving at the World Cup break in third place. And after the Winterpause, they lost just 3 games, meaning that they arrived at the final game of the season with a simple task: win against already relegated Regensburg or match Hamburg's result away to Sandhausen, and they would be promoted to the Bundesliga for the first time in their history. You see, only the top 2 teams in the Zweite Bundesliga qualify for automatic promotion, with the third place team having to contend with a place in the relegation playoff. And as the games kicked off, already promoted Darmstadt were first, Heidenheim second, and Hamburg third. But of course, it turned into a disaster. Hamburg scored early and held their lead. Heidenheim were fraught with nerves and fell 2-0 down. An own goal did reduce the deficit to 2-1, but Heidenheim still entered stoppage time needing to find 2 goals. Over in Sandhausen, Hamburg's game had finished. After it did, the stadium announcer congratulated the travelling Hamburg fans on their promotion as they poured onto the pitch in celebration. Except Heidenheim's game had not yet finished, and none of the Hamburg fans had phone reception to check that what they'd been told was true, or to find out that there were 11 minutes of stoppage time in the other game. So, at 94 minutes, back at the Heidenheim game, Frank Schmidt's side were awarded a penalty for a penalty box shirt pull, and Jan-Niklas Beste converted it to make it 2-2. And then, with 99 minutes on the clock, Heidenheim drove forward in search of history. Beste crossed deep to the back post, and everybody missed it, except Tim Kleindienst, the team's top scorer, who scored the goal that took Heidenheim up. Back in Sandhausen, news of the late goal began to filter through, and the Hamburg pitch invasion suddenly started to take on a very different tone as their fans realised that they weren't heading to the Bundesliga after all, but to a playoff with a strong and improving Stuttgart. Later, Sandhausen would apologise to Hamburg for the incorrect information. But either way, Heidenheim were promoted. For the first time in their history, with a wage spend 23 times less than Bayern, 12 times less than Dortmund, and even half of Köln, Augsburg or Freiburg, they were a Bundesliga side. That night, as the team bus arrived in the car park outside the Voith Arena just after midnight, thousands of fans were waiting for the team, at least 6,000 of whom had been in Regensburg with the team and had beaten them back. And so far, they haven't done too badly in the top flight either. Heidenheim beat Stuttgart and Union Berlin at the Voith Arena, came back to draw 2-2 with Borussia Dortmund at the Westfalenstadion, and have generally punched well above their weight. And in September, officially, Frank Schmidt became the longest-serving head coach in German football's history. Imagine that you could learn everything that you need to know about football news in 10 minutes without having to read anything. Well, that's why we made the Daily Football Briefing Show. It's a new 10-minute podcast that catches you up on all the football news, plus what's on TV that night. Published every weekday is the Daily Football Briefing Show. Check the link below to subscribe for free now, wherever you get your podcasts.